in October. That is the BFI London Film Festival, and my co-host Clotilde was there. And how are you, Clotilde?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I am doing great, and you were at that London Film Festival, which the films today were also part of that festival. It's a happy anniversary to yourself as well. This is 1 year you've been doing the Chronicle, so how do you
Oh,
feel?
it's crazy. I feel like it's gone really fast, but at the same time, I don't know. It's weird, isn't it? But it's crazy that it's 1 year. I would have never, I don't know, I would have never imagined. Glad to still be here and talk about movies.
Excellent. Yeah. I'm the same because anyone that's been listening since the start, it was just me, and I gave it 6 months. I wasn't expecting
Hmm.
to get to episode 35. But here we are. Yeah, we are. And what we'll be reviewing in this episode 35 is two films. It's the Apprentice and The Well Robot. Both are now in UK cinemas. And the first film for this week's episode 35 of the Chronicle is The Apprentice, which, as I said, it's in UK and Irish cinemas from Studio Canal. And this is directed by Ali Abbasi, who's a Danish-Iranian director. People might know him for films like Spider, fantasy film called Border, which is in the movie. Have you ever seen that, Clotilde? Border?
No, but it's actually on my list. I never actually got around to it. It sounds interesting. I think there was a lot of talk around it, which made me want to see it.
I have seen it. I really enjoyed it. I reviewed Sonny People's Movies, my review. I really liked it. Very, very dark themes, but a very, very good film. Also, the director also did episodes. Is it The Last of Us? He's done a few of them. So this stars Sebastian Stan, and he plays Donald Trump. It also stars Jeremy Strong. People might know Jeremy Strong from Succession. Sebastian Stan, he was the Winter Soldier in the Marvel movies and the Captain America movies. And Martin Donovan, he played Fred Trump Sr. Maria Bakalova, people might know her from things like Bodies, and the second Borat film. She plays Ivana Trump. So this film takes us back to the origins of Donald Trump, and then they're brought to life in such a provocative way. It's a portrait of the man and obviously his mentor, which is Roy Cohn, which Jeremy Strong plays, and he was a notorious lawyer who will never let the truth get away from winning a fight. And Sebastian Stan, as I say, he plays Donald Trump. So we start back in the 1970s. It also goes into the 1980s as well. New York was a bankrupt city at this time. Rats in the streets. The houses were falling apart. Crime rates were unbelievable. If you think of it, it's much like society today. And we first meet young Donald, very ambitious. He helps to run his father's business. They're like real estates. It was real estates, wasn't it, Clotilde? I believe so. His father, Fred Trump.
Hmm.
Yeah. So it was like a real estate. As I said, the city was falling apart and it was the verge of
Yeah.
bankruptcy. We see Donald going around collecting rent for the people who are virtually impoverished, and he's collecting his rent. And you see, there's at one point you see going to the doors and the reaction he gets. A lot of times people are trying to make excuses up because they don't have the money, they're either not working or they're drunk, and sometimes it's aggressive, and it's really, really weird. So it ends up when we see him, he's going to the bars and things like that, and he goes into this one bar, and in this bar he meets Roy Cohn. And Roy Cohn, people will know, Roy Cohn made a name for himself back in the 1950s. He was one of the legal counsels for McCarthy, as in McCarthy witch hunts, which hounded out anyone famous, a writer, authors, politicians who they believe to be communists. You don't need me to tell you the amount of people who are subjected to be communists. A lot of them weren't communists, it's just because of the political views. A lot of them are openly communists. He goes to Roy to actually get him to help him in a case that the buildings that him and his father, Fred Trump, owned, they were saying that they never let any African Americans in there. And so obviously he goes to Roy, and what Roy ends up becoming his mentor. So this is like a sort of character study, like student and mentor. It's like Roy shows him the ropes of how to be ruthless. First of all, he shows him his side of his power and his ambitions, where he wins him this case. And it was just absolute pandemonium when he wins it. So he starts to learn him his way of thinking, his way of business. So this takes you into sort of dark depths of ambition and power. And he learns him the three tenets please forgive me, Clotilde, if I do get these wrong. The three rules that Roy lived by, and overall Donald Trump nowadays still lives by. The art of the deal is attack, attack, attack. Admit nothing, deny everything, and claim victory, and never admit defeat. Is that the right ones? Did I get it right now?
I think that sounds about right. I've seen the film in like May, but that sounds about right.
Yeah, it's mantras that Donald Trump lives by these days. So this film, you get to see Trump rising from the ashes. It's like the phoenix from the flames, you know, rising from the ashes from being that guy who collected the money, the rent, to the guy who wanted to open Trump Tower in the most criminally the area which was round, was it the train station? Give me, I forget the name of the actual train station in New York, where the area is impoverished, it's falling apart, there's people committing crime outside the building. Donald Trump is determined to bring jobs to the city, become one of the most wealthiest, prominent figures in New York. At the beginning, no one would trust him. So gradually, as he uses these three mantras, you get to see him rising and rising and rising. But at the same time, he's trying to prove to his dad. His dad was like an old army man. He was always wanting to prove to him that he's worthy. His ideas are worthy. But his dad, throughout the majority of the time, until Donald starts to be more successful. No, this is not the way. Don't trust Roy Cohn. He is a criminal. And Roy Cohn, in a way, was a sort of criminal because he was taken to court several times. But he has a little room. What I'll say, folks, before I say what I'm going to say, is throughout this episode and other episodes of the Chronicle, sometimes there might be little spoilers, and we do apologise, but sometimes these spoilers have to be said depending on the film. But if you know the story of Donald Trump, Roy Cohn, it's not really spoilers. He has this little room where he has evidence and everyone he can incriminate to get his way. And believe it or not, for the case at Donald Trump, for the judge who won him the case about saying that he's not racist, he had something on that judge, and he also had something on the judge, because what Donald Trump was wanting to do, he was trying to get tax free on it. He was trying to get the Trump Tower tax free so he can build it. And this time, obviously, the taxes, they help the city. So obviously the city was in uproar with it, but obviously, as we know, over time we get to see things happening in the background. We're rising to power, so we get to a point here, the students starting to take over from the mentor. As I said, we start in the 70s and we gradually build into the 1980s. So when Donald starts to get invited to like house parties, he starts to see the other side of Roy Cohn, a private side of Roy Cohn. And then when it gets into the 1980s, that private side sort of runs into the 1980s when the AIDS epidemic came out. No one at that time understood what AIDS actually was. Many, including many well-known, respectable people, were thinking AIDS was just gay men and women, which, as we now know, it's anyone not being safe. So he starts to see another side of Roy Cohn, and we eventually get to see the side of Donald Trump that we now know for today. Maria Palakova, she plays Ivana Trump. She's very good. I don't know about you, Clotilde. I think she's very impactful in this. She's not in it a lot, but the part she's in it, she's very impactful. And my God, she had a very harrowing scene. I'm not going to say the scene. I think you know the scene I'm talking about. A scene that something that Donald Trump does to her, and it's a harrowing scene. But if you know the history of Donald Trump, you know he was taken to court for that. But as in, was he guilty or not? What happened to that? I'll let you read up, anyone that's listening, read up in the history of it, because as you know, if you'll agree with Clotilde, there's a lot of background history in this story of Donald Trump. There's a lot to be saying, a lot that's been hidden, a lot. But do you agree this is like a character study, how Donald Trump's shaped, I would say, the pivotal part of him, how he becomes who we now know him as?
Absolutely. I think in many ways, it's a sort of villain origin story.
Yeah.
I think that's very much the concept. I don't know how well that works. But I think that's sort of like where the film starts. I think for me, it also feels like this is perhaps more of a film on Roy Cohn himself rather than Donald Trump. I think they're both really good actors, and I think Sebastian Stan does an excellent job. It's really hard to portray like somebody like Donald Trump, who's been,
Yeah.
kind of mocked really for his way of speaking. And I think Sebastian Stan does it well in the sense that he remains, I think, very realistic in his portrayal, but you still see the man that we know as Donald Trump today. But having that said, I do feel like maybe the character that shines through the most is Roy, because I think maybe his story is just a little bit more interesting. The sort of younger years of Donald Trump really don't have much sort of substance to them. It's that stuff that I think we largely already know.
Yeah.
It's just like how he got rich, basically. And I
Yeah.
think Roy, in that sense, is more interesting. There's a lot more mystery around his character, and that's very intriguing, I think, for the audience. And you mentioned the sort of AIDS plotline, and how that comes into it is, I think, more interesting as a portrayal of the time that they lived in. And it's an interesting commentary that I think is not pushed far enough. So I would say it's a character study, but perhaps more on Roy than on Trump himself. But overall, like, I didn't dislike the film. I think maybe I walked into it expecting something a bit different. I think as a story on Roy Cohn and his influence on Trump, it works quite well. But I feel like I and a lot of the viewers expected something a little bit different, something that would sort of dig deeper in Trump's life. I think especially, in 2024 when the film is coming out, it's like the American elections are in a month,
Yeah.
basically. We're very, very close to the real possibility that he might be president again. And I think with this contest, the film should have had a stronger stand. I don't think films exist in a vacuum. I think the context of production and the context of release is very important to how the audience reacts to it. So it plays a part for me that it just feels like the film could have said something a lot more powerful and a lot more striking in this day and age, with this context that we know that he's running for president and that he's been impeached and everything that has happened in the past 8 years now. I think it should have actually said something more rather than sort of just portraying his story or like the beginning of who Donald Trump is. I would have wanted to see maybe something. I'm not saying it should have focused on a different time period, but I think it should have hinted or foreshadowed or done something that would make me realize how big of a threat it is that he's running for president again, how crazy it is that he's running for president again, despite being a convicted felon. I think these are really important
Yeah.
elements that perhaps could have been brought into the story. And I think it's a shame that they weren't in that sense. But the performances are great. And I think it's very impressive because only the film relies on its characters more than anything else. There's little sort of plot, and I think the conflict is quite predictable, which is not necessarily a bad thing. And
Yeah.
it's all reliant, I think, on the characters and therefore on the performances very much. I will say I watched it a long time ago now because I watched it in May, and I feel like the thing that stays with me the most when I think about the film, because I haven't seen it since then, is the acting more than anything else. Like, there's very maybe little that I remember about the other technical elements compared to what I think strikes the most for me in this performance, that is, or in this film, that is the performances. So those are the sort of elements I would want to commend the most.
Yeah, I think also, especially if you are American, it depends what your views on Donald Trump. Are you someone that's going to support him? Are you a Republican? Or are you a Democrat? Might decipher, are you going to enjoy this movie? Obviously, Donald Trump's legal team, I believe, put is it a cease and a desist
Mm-hmm.
to get this film to stop. That, I believe, is one of the reasons why this film gets slightly delayed, or it struggled to get someone to actually release the film, a distribution company. So, and the thing is, both of us, we're not Americans, so ideally we are seen as neutral, a neutral view. But same time, there's a lot of people here in the UK who have a lot of keen interest in what happens in America, and some people say what happens in America politically eventually does affect us, and in a way they are sort of right in that sense of things. As in, yeah, I totally agree. It is Roy Cohn and Jeremy Strong I think is the highlight of the movie. He's very magnetic. The stare that he had was unbelievable, and it was very menacing. It was a magnetic performance. He was absolutely fantastic, and you gradually, as over time, you could see his character changing. He was a man who was never going to lose, never going to lose. He was always going to win, even when he was when he was defeated. As in the mantra that Donald Trump goes by, like the claim victory, never admit defeat. You could, depending on your views of the last election in America, in the January the 6th, that is one of the mantras that Donald Trump to this day still, and anyone that supports the Republicans, supports him, does believe on. Personally, myself, I'd rather not be any Republican or Democrat. Yeah, I like to see it from outside, but as in personal views, I rather not get involved. Did you know that Donald Trump used to be a Democrat?
I actually think I heard about this because I just thought, how insane is that? Maybe it's not actually. Maybe it just tells us a lot
Yeah.
about the current state of politics. But
Yeah, he was. No, he was, and believe it or not, who knows his biggest friends were when he was a Democrat. It was the Clintons. And when you see what went through in the 2016, it was the 2016-2015 election, how vicious both of them were.
yeah,
Something definitely happened between the two of them to get them separate, to go different ways. It's terrifying when something like that happens. You're right. Sebastian Stan as Donald Trump, he is great. He gets a lot of mannerisms right, even at times his accent comes out. He gets it right. He got that really good.
absolutely.
Yeah,
But it doesn't feel like an impersonation, which is what I really like about his performance.
yeah,
I think it would have been really easy with like somebody like Trump, who's essentially become like a character for like stand-up comedians as well, to
yeah.
pull into that and to sort of like make a mockery out of it. And I think he does that really well of like making it seem and sound like Donald Trump. It's very believable, but it's not like an impersonation. I think that there's a fine line there, and I think he does a good job at keeping the two separate.
Yeah. I totally agree. He was, he could have been into. It was Alec Baldwin. He did it in Saturday Night Live, which is probably the
Right.
most famous impersonation of that. And yeah, he had to sort of cut off. And sometimes I think when any film actor or actress is doing a biography, a biopic of someone who's well known or someone who's got well known mannerisms, the looks, things that they do, the movements, their voice. Sometimes you just got to cut off and go, right, we'll do this, and that, but I'm not going there because if I do, I'll make a mockery of the film. Because sometimes they'll go, I thought it was a biopic, not a comedy. So
Okay.
so he was right there. I think when they were saying we were talking about this political side, I remember I was listening to an interview with Sebastian Stan on a podcast when I walk to work in the mornings. I've got my headphones on, got a podcast. It's because I start 3-4 in the morning, so I need some. I'm walking for a couple of miles, and it was WTF and Mark Maron, and what he was saying was, I think they were trying to get a balance where they were neither both sides of the political side, both sides of the political stance in America, which is, I think, is mission impossible these days, especially when it's somebody
Yeah.
like Donald Trump. It's
And I think maybe that's why the film doesn't hit as much as it could to me, because I do think it tries to place it like it plays it a bit too safe in that sense. Like, of course it's not in favor of Donald Trump. I think that's quite obvious.
yeah,
But at the same time, it doesn't go as far as it could have, and I think that's to sort of like, in a way, keep everyone happy. Of course, not like Donald Trump and his lawyers, but
yeah,
keep sort of like the mainstream audience happy. And I think that may be the biggest sort of like fault that is holding it back,
yeah.
because it's just not enough, is it? I think. It's just a bit of a shame, because you would think that a film on Donald Trump in 2024 would just have more to say, really, or just take more of a firm stand. Like, I don't doubt that it's against him, but it's just, it could have done more, like, on the eve of the American election.
Exactly. So to round this up, your final thoughts on the film and what rating would you give it?
I gave it 3.5 because, like I said, I really like the acting. in it, I think is quite impressive, given that these are real people, real, very famous people, like you said.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think if it wasn't for the acting, it could sadly be forgettable. So 3.5, I think, is quite good, quite
Yeah.
generous.
Yeah. I'm more I was between a 3.5 and a 3, but I'm going to stick with 3. Totally agree. The acting is the strongest part, especially Jeremy Strong. He was magnetic in it. I would be severely disappointed if he's not up there in the best supporting actor when it comes to the award season, because he was absolutely superb on that side of things. I agree with you. I think the films maybe should have focused more on Roy Cohn's character. The Apprentice, Donald Trump's The Apprentice, as we know, Roy Cohn, it's all about that. And that gives you the idea, yeah, it's all going about Roy Cohn, but it's not really, as you know. So if they focus more on that, I think we may have had I think the film might have got a slightly better overall rating with a lot of people.
Yes, I think so. And a better structure. I think if the structure would have been more tight
Yeah.
and work better, really.
Yep. So I'm giving it 3 stars. So you have it, folks. The Apprentice, which is out in UK cinemas and Irish cinemas now, we both give it 3.5 and 3 stars. And for the final review for this episode, episode 35 of the Chronicle, we've got a DreamWorks film, DreamWorks Universal Pictures film. That's A Wild Robot. And Clotilda, would you like to tell us about it, what it's all about, and if you liked it or didn't like it?
Yes. So the wild robot starts on a desert, well, seems like a desert island, after a shipwreck that has caused a sort of like a shipment of robots to be lost really at sea. And we will focus on this one robot called Roz, which is a nickname from its manufacturing manager. And Roz kind of gets woken up by, or activated really, by the animals around her in this island. And it's really struggling to adapt because, of course, at first it doesn't understand the animals, and its sort of sole mission is to help humans. But how can you do that in an island where there's only animals? But slowly, Roz is very determined to sort of complete her mission, which is to essentially help someone. So that kind of drives her to build a relationship with the animals, learn how to communicate with them, and more specifically with one like orphaned gosling. And it's really cute, I think, how the sort of bond develops between. You would never think that a robot, a little animal, could have this sort of very touching and very heartwarming relationship. I love how the film does that. I think it's very sweet, and that's what makes it emotional, how they care for each other despite being completely different, right? One is a robot like made by artificial intelligence, and one is an animal. I think that's like super cool, and it's something that I didn't entirely expect when I walked into it. I also kind of walked into it blind as much as I could, and I think this film works if you like know as little as possible about it, because it's just really interesting to kind of live this island and discover these characters as the robot does. It's also directed by Chris Sanders, who's worked with like DreamWorks and Disney before. I think some of his most famous pictures were um, How to Train Your Dragon and Lilo and Stitch. He was a co-writer and co-director in both. I think you can see that a lot in his style in the Wild Robot. Very DreamWorks, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
it's very much that style, which is not a bad thing. It's just you see it and you're like, this is a DreamWorks animation, in the best way, because even in terms of like themes and like emotions that it evokes, it's I think very much in that range. I think it's interesting as well because it's one of those films that is like for kids, but not really. Like I think with animation, you often think it's exclusively for kids, and we've learned to know, I hope, that that's not true. There's a lot of animation films that are absolutely not for kids, and there's a lot of animation films that are for kids, but also for adults. I think that's when any film, any genre really works best. And I think we can see that a lot in The Wild Robot because there's things in it that I think work for kids quite well, like the whole animal thing, the whole animal situation that is quite, I think, appealing to children. But there's like these more emotional themes of like motherhood and finding yourself and finding your way really, maybe the most inhospitable environment for a robot, I think maybe are even more powerful for the adults than the kids. I think the kids, like really young kids, may not appreciate it as much. It's a bit like Inside Out in that sense that maybe you can only appreciate it after a certain age. And I think it works for like both adults and kids, just in different ways, which is something I really enjoy when either DreamWorks or Disney. I intend to do that quite a lot, and it's a really interesting balance, and it's very tricky to achieve. But I think the film does it really well. I just also really like the way the sort of like whole design. The sh the whole island is like beautiful, and there's a sequence at the beginning where the robot kind of walks through it, runs through it, and it's our first approach to the island and to the animals that inhabit it. And I think it's just so beautiful when animation can create such a vibrant world. You really feel like you're there. It's visually stunning. There's so much into it,
Yeah.
especially as we see the different seasons. Like we see winter, quite a big plot point as well. And I just find it so beautiful how they were really able to capture that to show the different seasons. It's amazing. It's not easy from an animation
No.
point of view. And the animals are also fantastic. I think the design on the animals is brilliant because we see so many different ones. Like we see a bear and we see a fox and we see a falcon. We see so many animals that I think it must have been really hard to sort of nail the design for each of them, especially when they're all together. I think it's quite impressive in terms of scale and in terms of having these very detailed animals. But all together in one scene, it must have been such a hard work. I think a lot of animation films end up sort of focusing on one or two or three sort of character designs, even when it comes to animals. So I was really impressed by how each of them is so detailed because they appear quite a lot of times, and it's really important to see them together as well. I absolutely love that. And I think, like everyone else, I think everyone at the festival as well told me like this one's gonna make you cry. And it did. Surprise is there. I think it still came as a surprise to me how sort of touching the story was. Like when you think about it, it's a story about a robber in Desert Island. It shouldn't make me cry as much as it did, but I think there's so many things that we can see in it. I think so many things that people can relate to. There's also the whole point of like Rose feeling different from the animals and not accepted because she's not an animal. And then it's her sort of unique being different that sets her apart and makes her also like such an important part of the island and this community. And I think all these themes, there's motherhood as well, having, finding yourself a family and people that care for you, they come together quite beautifully considering how many different things that the movie is tackling. Um, so from a script writing point of view, I also really appreciated that. It's just like I think fun in some ways. I didn't expect it to be sort of like fast paced, if that makes sense, especially
Yeah.
like in the last act. It goes quite quickly from like one place to the other. Um, I think the beginning is a bit slower, so maybe that's why I didn't expect it to kind of pick it up well and create some very interesting action sequences. It seems to jump in a way from one thing to another in a very good way. It's quite impressive to see, I think. And I think in this as well, you can see the director's background. Like you can tell he worked on like so many films, both like as a visual artist and as a writer and director. I think his experience is part of what makes this film so good and so successful. I think I just read as well that it opened, like it's the first in terms of box office in the UK, and it just opened. So for animation film, that is also really impressive. We know, I
Yes.
think that animation tends to suffer from like a sort of genre bias, although animation itself is not truly a genre if we're being technical about it, but it does suffer, I think, from a
Yeah.
bias, especially for older, for an adult audience that tends to think it's exclusively for kids, like I said. So it's quite impressive to see it has such a big box office result, although box office isn't everything. I think it's very positive that it did for the future of animation, perhaps, especially because it's not like Inside Out 2, right? It's not the big Disney sequel. And I'm hoping that this will carry the film through award season as well, because I think it deserves a lot of attention. I think this has been a great year for animation. as well. There's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
been so many great products and exciting films in terms of like genre and style. It's looking really good, isn't it, for animation? That makes me happy.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. I think it's possibly Dreamworks Animation's best film. It's beautifully
I think it
crafted.
might.
I think it's a beautifully crafted film. I would be severely disappointed if it's not in the running for best animation. I think the only challenge I can see to it is probably going to be Inside Out 2. And
Yeah, and
two,
maybe Flow.
yes, yes, I believe Robert writes for the People's Movies. He watched it in Toronto, and it's to show you how much it's loved. Curzon Cinema films are releasing it here in the UK. The trailer just got released today. That's the 22nd of October. It's a very simple tale, but it has a lot of, as you mentioned, a few of them, the important life lessons in there. Like themes, as you said, about the motherhood, being the first, it was the first parent that Bright Bill saw was Roz, and she's still thinking when she first gets a little egg, she's still thinking like a robot, she needs an assignment. But obviously she met Pinktail, who's the possum, and I love the possums, especially
Yeah,
that
me
scene.
too.
The voice, Catherine O'Hara plays the voice of the mother, and she actually says motherhood is like an assignment. No one's ready for parenthood, and think about it. Yeah, I totally agree with her there. And eventually, as we see during the film, she starts to get more emotional. Algorithms go out the door, and she sort of becomes like a den mother to all the animals without saying too much into it. Excuse me. And she starts to find compassion and respect, and the animals start to show that towards it as well, and it's there as well. But back to the opossums, I loved it when they first crossed paths with Roz. They called her Monster. By the way, it's Lupita Nyong'o who does the voice.
Brilliant as well.
Yeah, people might know her from the voice. She was the lead actress in A Quiet Place Day One. That was her. That was the actress. That's her. Fink was Pedro Pascal, and the older Bright Bill is Kit Connor. If that name's at the end of anyone's tongue, if anyone's seen Netflix's show, is it Heartstopper? He
Huh.
is Nick. That's him. There's other people in like Bill Nye who just appears in everything these days. And he's appeared in quite a few films that was out at the London Film Festival as well. He's in there as well. Ving Rhames in there, and there's loads of that. Mark Hamill plays the voice of the bear. Not a lot of people realise that.
Yeah,
Right to the very, very end. Luke Skywalker is the bear.
I love that. I realized that as the credits rolled, and I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah, it was. Back to the possums. So when I said it's a monster, and anyone knows possums, part of their defence is to act dead, or as we all know the slogan, play the possum. And I thought it was hilarious. All our kids, Pinktail's kids, they're all trying to die, and they're all trying to name certain ways of dying, diseases, and things like that. These little kids don't know what these diseases are. Yeah, but if you've got that, it takes about 6 months. You'll still be alive. You'll be dead for it. Oh, it was really, really funny. Really, really, really funny that part as well. I saw a lot of the giant robot in this. Wally, especially with a lot of the loneliness and trying to discover who she is. In the world, played a part of that. Also, Silent Running. I even seen a wee bit of that in it. Mark Kermode's favourite film. I think there's also message of where the adults may get it more. 'Cause some people might see there's a lot of warning about AI, because obviously AI is starting to become part of our daily lives here and online. ChatGPT is one example. All the search engines, Google, Outlook, I think I'll eventually have it. They've all got their own little AI system as well. So when we first see Roz, and she's frantically going everywhere, terrifying the animals, following the animals. She just wants to help them, and then she starts giving them all stickers You know, they were really terrified. It's like she was a monster. They were unaware what our values were in society. And obviously, throughout the film, the animals start to learn, and she starts to learn about the animals as well. So there's a lot of sort of warning there. And obviously, she starts thinking outside our algorithms as well. And that's what terrifies a lot of people in real life. You know, they think AI is going to take over. We're not going to have any jobs anymore. We're just going to have, what's the thing, universal income, basic income. That's something that's been mentioned before, you know, in society and that type of thing. And also, as you said, it's all the parenthood about Bright Bill. Without giving too much away, he get angry with Roz when he learns something about himself, and she gets emotional. She wants to help him. She wants to show, I'm here to help you to fly, to swim, to migrate as well. And in the background, was it Longneck, which is Bill Nye's character. He's like the senior goose. He's watching everything for the background, and he's seeing how the own geese, the geese, he's a goose basically, Bright Bill. They are rejecting him because he's the robot's goose, you know. And there's that there as well. And obviously she's just wanting to save him. And then obviously she's like a parent when the kids leave the nest. She's so sad. She's waiting, you know, during the winter and that. And that's when she starts to learn. She's got other ways to show her motherly love as well. And it's a wee bit of in this of the Lion King, you know, with the circle of life. We start to learn about comes back into the sort of den mother side of things where they start to work together. The animals rather than they're on their food chain type thing, you know, work together and we'll survive, you know, that type of thing. Not just that, obviously, and the ending is when the island or the forest, whatever you want to call it, it's unexpected visitors. It's an absolute bombastic ending as well, you know, and you know, and this is actually rated U, and it has a lot of quite strong themes in it. But I think they were done in a good way. I think they were done it. They never undermined the targeted audience, the kids. So I was sort of, whilst watching the screen, I watched it in a public screening. I was sort of half-eye one way, sort of my ears listening to what was happening. And the kids were laughing, and some of the kids, when they saw the big explosions, they saw the colours. They were all struck. They were loving everything that was on the screen. One of the themes is death in it as well, and that's quite a strong thing for this targeted audience as well, you know. And they done it they never done it. What I loved about it, and they never done it in an adult way. They done it in a childlike way, you know, the way where, you know, they try and softly let know that person's not longer here anymore. But don't worry, you know. I mean, it's a gorgeous movie, you know. It's an absolute gorgeous movie as well. You know, and so Clotilda, before I give my end views, what's your sort of final thoughts on this film and what sort of rating would you give it?
I really liked it. I'm just really happy, like I said, this animation do so well. And with new stories as well, I think it's easy to feel like everything is a remake or a sequel, especially this year, the biggest film. So it's very refreshing to see something new. If I had to find like a fault to this film, which is not even like massive, is that maybe it sort of tries to tie things up too nicely.
Yes.
At the end, like I do think it could have ended a bit earlier, with a sort of like more abrupt ending. But I do like it doesn't feel too long and it doesn't feel unnecessary, so I can sort of forgive that. And the other thing is that I think visually it does feel a bit derivative of his previous projects, but it's still stunning, so I don't mind too much. All of this to say that I ended up giving it a 4 stars.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm a 4-star as well. I think it was a vibrant, gorgeous film. The colours, as you said, about the season changes, the character design. I saw a lot of homage to Hayao Miyazaki in this, in Studio Ghibli, especially in the robots.
Yeah.
Yep. I saw a lot of homage to that. And also obviously in the storytelling, because a lot of Miyazaki films do deliver a lot of themes that this film covers. But obviously, if you've seen the Ghibli films, they grow with the audience. So when they do one film, It might be targeted at the audience that The Wild Robot is targeting. And the next one, it might be a little bit older, before you know it, up and up and up to where they're teens and they can understand very strong themes. Some themes might be quite emotional, they might be quite harrowing as well. So yeah, I give it 4 stars as well. It ain't perfect. It's a fantastic, charming, gorgeous film with a lot of important themes in it. And as I said, I would be severely disappointed if it's not an Oscar contender for the best animated feature. As in which one I would give it to, it's quite hard to say, because the only other option I think I can remember at the top of my head I've not seen Flo is Inside Out 2. So there you go, folks. Both of us give The Wild Robot 4 stars. There you have it, folks. That's my 2 reviews for episode 35 of The Chronicle. Both of the films are now out in UK cinemas. As it was a year ago that Clotilde joined us here on the podcast, we opened up with a London Film Festival special. In a way, this is a London Film Festival special because the 2 films were reviewed, played at the festival. So Clotilde, as you did in the previous episode, which was episode 21, if I remember rightly, which is available. Yep. Would you like to just tell us a lot about just a short lowdown of the BFI London Film Festival, the films you saw, the films you liked, maybe didn't like, and sort of films that we can maybe look forward to, maybe ones that we can maybe review in future episodes? Just a few minutes, just talk 5 minutes or something.
Yes, absolutely. It's hard. Where to begin? I think the lineup this year was pretty strong, all things considered. They had some of my personal favorites from both Venice and Cannes, so I think that's quite impressive. Basically, sort of my top, I want to say 6 of Venice was at the festival at 1. So I was really excited as well to see people's reaction to that, to films such as The Room Next Door, I'm Still Here. What was it as well? Forgetting because I haven't seen them again. So
was it the Grand Tour?
That's the one. And The Seed of the Sacred Fig, Anora. These are all films that did really well at their respective festivals and that I very much enjoyed. So it's just very interesting to see how people react to it at other festivals, I think. But having that said, my personal ranking that I recently made of the 37 films that I saw at the festival does not include films that I have already seen. So if I don't mention them, that is why I've seen them at Venice or at Cannes. So it was a good chance for me to sort of catch up as well on the films that I had missed and the films that I was looking forward to. I think my favorite film of the whole festival was, surprisingly for me, Conclave. I didn't think I was going to enjoy it as much as I did, but I absolutely loved it. I will be surprised if it's not a big Oscar contender in the acting categories and soundtrack music ones as well. It's just so well made. I was very surprised with how much I enjoyed it. Everybody also seemed to like it from my screening, so I think it's going to have quite a positive overall reaction. Very positive. I also really like The Baronet. This one played at Cannes and I had missed it. I absolutely loved it. I think easily my top 10 of the year, easily my top 2 of the festival. And it's such a interesting film. It kind of plays into the horror category with a feminist lens, which I think is something that we've seen a lot this year. But for me, it's perhaps the most successful one in this matter. It's just, I think, brilliant. I'm very happy to see it obviously come to London. It's a French film, so it's nice to see it outside of France as well. And I hope it's going to sort of keep that going and be distributed abroad in that sense.
Yeah.
I also really liked Hard Roots, which I believe was maybe a UK premiere, I want to say, or a European premiere. It's amazing. It's so good. It's by Mike Lee. I think at first it's very upsetting. It's a film about anger, about depression. There's nothing like glamorous in it. It's a very hard watch, and I think one that might make people upset in the sense that it's very hard to sit through it, and I think it needs time to stay with you to understand how powerful it is. And in terms of world premieres as well, I really liked this documentary called The Extraordinary Miss Flowers. Really, nobody has seen it, and it's just so good. It's very unique, and I think it's so special when something like a documentary and a biopic, because the film is a bit of both, is so groundbreaking that you feel like it's innovating a genre that I think is overused in many ways. So that is definitely a highlight for me. I also quite like Blitz, which is also a world premiere. It's a British film, which feels very appropriate for the London Film Festival. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the way it tells the story and the way it's sort of set in London. And London is, in many ways, a protagonist too. And I also really like We Live in Time. I know there's been a lot of talk about it. It made me cry. I think if I had to like give an award to the film that made me cry the most in the festival, that is We Live in Time. Me and everyone else in my screening, I would like to add, we were all like sort of sat there during the credits, just sobbing. I've only seen that happen in like All of Us Strangers. Like you could tell people had just watched
Yes.
it. We all walked out sobbing. It's incredible in that sense. And it's just very sad. But it's also quite funny. I really like how it sort of makes some balance in terms of films I didn't like, unfortunately there were some, you can't win.
No, you can't. No, spill the
I
beans.
There's gotta be some. I didn't particularly like That Christmas, which was also a world premiere. It's just I already forgot it, and I feel so sad saying that, but I did. It's Netflix Christmas animation, and it's exactly as you would imagine it, if not worse. It's
Yeah.
I think the only memorable thing is an Ed Sheeran song. And I think that tells you all you need to know about the film. I also think my lowest ranking film gets an honorable mention. That is Endurance, which is a documentary. I had to sit with this. At first, I sort of I believe I gave it like 2.5 or a 3. Like I was around that. I didn't like hate it actively. It's not a strong documentary. I think it's trying to tell two stories and it doesn't tell either of them. But what really sort of bothered me, and it's why I ended up lowering my ranking and lowering my score, is that I think doesn't sound like I'm being dramatic. I think it's an unethical documentary. I don't like when documentaries use reenactment usually. I think it's not done well. I think reenactment is a very dangerous technique in documentaries, but worse than anything else, the film uses AI for reenactment, and I could not, sit with that. It's obvious, it's disturbing, not in a good way, not in a way that the film wants it to be, and it's completely unnecessary, and I think betrays what a documentary is meant to be. So that really bothered me. The more I thought about it, the more I disliked this. So in this sense, it gets an honorable mention. But overall, I would think it's a good festival. I know there's been a lot of talk about how this festival feels a bit like less festival. There's not as much hype. I think London is weird because it's basically the end of festival season, towards the beginning of award season. But also, I think this this year has been so weird. I think we are sort of suffering from the writer's strike. There's been so many films delayed.
Yes.
Also, so I think the whole festival season has felt weird, and that has reflected very much in London. Like the world premieres were smaller films. Some of them, like half of the people haven't seen them. Yeah, it was a weird festival, I have to say. But in terms of films, I think it went quite well. I'm happy with, what they managed to get, especially from big festivals like Cannes and Venice. But yeah, there was something about it that felt odd. And I think it's just a reflection of the industry at large and sort of like all the crisis that's going on. Nobody has a job, which is very depressing. But
Yeah.
also like state of the film journalism is also not great. And I think all of this plays a part into how people approach this festival overall.
Yeah, one year I'm going to make it. I will be there. I will be there one
You
year.
have to.
But thank you very much for all the reviews you've done, and I like to thank all the guys who came on board the People's Movies this year. Hell of a lot of reviews, including yourselves, Scott, Frida, Robert, and all the new guys that came on board. Thank you very much. This has probably been my best year for London Film Festival. There you have it, folks. That's a wrap on episode 35 of the Chronicle. Thank you very much for joining me. The Wild Robot and The Apprentice are now both out in UK and Irish cinemas. Thank you very much to Studio Canal UK and Dreamworks and Universal Pictures for letting us see the movies. Thank you very much, Clotilde, for joining us here on this episode. Would you like to tell the folks where they can find you online?
So I'm at Films with Chloe on Twitter and on Letterboxd, and at the person being Chloe on Instagram.
That's great. Thank you very much. As on myself, you can find us on Facebook at The People's Movie, at X Twitter at The People's Movie, Instagram at The People's Movies. We're actually on Pinterest at TPM_UK. And you can find us over at YouTube at The People's Movies 1, where you can find the podcast on some of your popular sites to download your favourite podcasts, such as Spotify, Podbean, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Castbox, Listen Notes, to name a few. We will continue to chat sometimes over at the Chronicle Take too, so stay tuned on social media and at the People's Movies to find out when there might be the next episode, and also details of the next episode of the Chronicle, episode 36. You can also sign up for the email newsletter over at the People's Movies. You can also support us at Buy Me a Coffee and at PayPal. You will find the links to them on the website. Please do share this podcast on social media and with your friends. And if you're listening on this episode and other episodes on the podcast sites that I mentioned earlier, please do give us a rating. We are a small indie podcast, and the more people we get out to, you will help us when you do rate. Do a rating, do a little comment. Other than that, thank you very much again, Clotilde, for joining us. Thank you very much to you, the listeners, for joining us. Until the next time, enjoy the movies.